Well, it is certainly a very rainy afternoon. I've been meaning to come out into the garden for the past 2 days, but it has been really drizzly and actually a little bit cool. I'm nice and cozy in my cardigan. Cardigans in summer, I'm not used to that. But the rain seems to have stopped for now, and I don't think I am going to do gardening this afternoon. I think I'm just going to go for a walk around the garden and just relax and enjoy what I already have. And I thought I would take you along with me for an afternoon garden walk. I have my cup of peppermint tea keeping me company, and I thought the first thing that I would do was check on my seedlings, which I kind of have in this nice protected area next to the worm farms and the compost. So I sowed these seeds in my last video just a few days ago actually, and some of them have already sprouted. So I can see my zinnias are looking nice and happy. I'm excited to get some zinnias in the ground because they do okay in cooler temperatures. So coming into autumn, hopefully they'll provide a lot of beauty in the garden for me. And something else that I noticed was sprouting. It's kind of hard to see, but there are some little basil seedlings that have sprouted in here. Basil doesn't take too long to germinate if you have warm conditions. It's a really great end of summer crop because the soil temperatures are still nice and warm for basil to germinate, and it's a really fast growing crop. The other flowers and sage I think still have a little bit to go, but I thought I would kind of take you around. I am doing a little bit of planning in my head because lately I have been just doing a little bit too much in the garden, and it's starting to kind of feel a little bit more like a chore to kind of get things in the ground, then get content to produce for YouTube, which is totally not what I'm about, even though I do YouTube videos, but my primary reason for gardening is just to kind of help with my anxiety and to boost my happiness, and also just because I love growing my own food and providing habitat for animals around me. But I kind of lost that reason why I was gardening, and I just really want to take a step back from buying lots of plants and thinking that I have to fill the whole garden in and buy soil and all of those different things, because I just don't like spending that much money on things in the first place. And I'm totally okay with it being slow because we don't have to move from here if we don't want. We don't have a certain date that we have to be out, so I can just relax and breathe and be happy with what I have, which is actually a really productive small little garden right now. I have a lot planted, and every day I find myself getting distracted and peeking over my computer into the garden because my balcony looks out onto the garden, and it just brings me so much joy and happiness. I think the prospect of starting a garden makes every gardener a little bit giddy because there's so much potential to grow certain things and create beauty in the garden that it can definitely get a little bit overwhelming. But coming back to plants that you're familiar with and that you know and love can really help ground you, and herbs like thyme and rosemary back there have certainly done that for me to make this garden feel a little bit more homely and not so overwhelming. And here and there what I'm doing is actually just creating little circles that you would have seen in my seed sowing video last, of just little circles in my no-dig bed where I push apart a little circle, fill in with some potting mix, and then plant some seeds. And what this is doing is providing me with a really manageable task in the garden, but is also gradually providing me with food in the garden. And I think finding those really manageable steps for how to garden and how to not get overwhelmed in your garden is really important. Another thing that I did was I mulched all of the pathways yesterday, and I just said that's all I wanted to do today. I went down to go get some seagrass from the beach and mulched the pathways again, and that reinvigorated my joy for being out in the garden because the job wasn't that hard to do. It was quite enjoyable going down to the beach, having some fresh air, and I'm also preventing the weeds coming up from in the pathways. So overall it was such a small job, but doing those each and every day or even just once a week definitely does make a difference. So those are just kind of a few little small ideas of things that you can look at in your garden if everything's too overwhelming, but you still want to feel productive by doing at least something in your garden. Observation and spending time in your garden is definitely doing something, and you'll be learning a lot without even realizing. So I'm just walking down the back now. Behind me is where we're starting the kind of market garden. I say market garden, we're not really going to be starting a market, or that's not the plan currently. You never know what might happen. But we do want a really big growing space down here because I want to grow food and flowers for my neighbours and people living around here, like the nursing home where some of my family is, and just see kind of how much we can grow in this space. One of my other jobs, and this is again something that I'm observing today, is whether or not these citrus trees are going to stay alive or not. This is where I planted, the kookaburras are joining in. This is where I planted those 4 comfrey around this really sad looking tree. I think it's honestly going to need like a really, really hard trim right back down here. It is a little worrying because I can see different growth of lichens and moss around the base of the trunk, which can indicate that the whole thing is dying. So if you have any experience with citrus trees and reviving them, I've been looking at a lot of YouTube videos, but I think this one, I don't know, it may be time to retire and maybe get a few new ones. This one here as well has the same issues next to it. I can still see some new growth around it, but I think it's got every disease that citrus trees can have, really. So congratulations, tree. You've done well on that. And then there's one more down there that's also pretty sick. But the pear tree down there is pretty happy. It just needs netting for us to be able to have the fruit, which I think we're a little bit past that. So I like to come around and do a walk in the afternoon or the morning whenever I have a bit of spare time, because I can start to kind of get a to-do list going in my head, which also does make me feel productive. I'm definitely a list writer. I do like to write lists. So that's another thing that you can do in the garden to feel productive without, physically draining yourself or anything. And one of those to-do lists for me is sorting out that big pile back there. This used to be a greenhouse. Obviously not anymore. And I think I really want to turn this into a really large compost bay to be able to make a really large pile of compost and get it really hot to use for around the garden. So I think I can get maybe 2 bays in it, but I'm going to need to probably fill in the sides with either some wood or wire or something like that. I'm not sure yet. I'm definitely not the builder. Building skills are definitely not my forte, so I'll see what we can do. But having a lot of homemade compost is really important for us because I prefer to make a lot on site here rather than buying it in. And I also just really love the process of making compost. So that there is the little pathway that we walked up from down the bottom area with the citrus trees. And then we have this really nice kind of windrow here of trees and hedges that is really important because we get really strong winds here. Something that I had really forgotten about, that the south coast is very windy, and that's something that I really need to factor into the garden, so I need to be thinking about that when I'm designing the gardens, but I think around here, which is also sheltered from this shed, I really want to create a secret garden here, kind of full of both edibles and perennials and flowers. But I really do want to fulfill my childhood dreams and ambitions of having my own little secret garden as a kid, and even now at times. I'm very into fairies and enchanting worlds and exploring your inner child, which is something that I'm really trying to do this year. And I've kind of divided the place up into 3 different sections now. The first one being that zone 1, sorry to move the camera around, up there with the garden that I'm working on at the moment. And then I think down here behind me, I'll put an overlay of what this all looks like as well. I'd really like the kind of secret garden vibes. And then below this again is going to be our food forest and market garden. And every afternoon I'm coming out here and planning and walking around on the grass to see where the pathways naturally may go, so that I can then put the pathways in. And I've needed to do that for the past few weeks, and probably will need to for another few weeks, to know where I naturally walk through this area and this garden before I put in defined pathways. And that's something I really encourage you to do as well if you are starting out a new garden, is seeing where you naturally are drawn to and where you naturally walk through the garden before you then put your garden beds in and your pathways. I find doing that, it's then just so easy to plan a garden because it just naturally falls into place and you naturally can envision stuff a little bit easier, rather than jumping straight in and buying all the plants and buying all the soil and just getting really overwhelmed by the space. So I think that was a productive little walk in the garden this afternoon. I'm going to do a little bit more sitting and drinking of my cup of tea. I can hear that the lorikeets are around joining me for my afternoon cup of tea. I really hope that you're all enjoying your gardens and taking the time to enjoy them, rather than filling your weekends with jobs and ambitions and goals that you need to tick off the list because you just feel like you need to tick that list, which is where I was definitely getting, rather than just enjoying this garden. And I would love to know from you all how your gardens are making you happy at the moment, or how you are being gentle to yourself in the garden to make sure that you feel like you're being productive, but you're also really enjoying the space that you've created for yourself. I'm going to go enjoy this cup of tea, but I really hope you enjoyed today's little walk around the garden, and that it kind of gave you a little bit more perspective of what I'm working with and my plans, and just what I do in the garden a lot, which this is generally what I do. I come outside with a cup of tea, walk around with not listening to everything and just soaking everything in, because then I feel like things just naturally fall into place and it's not so overwhelming. I hope you're all having a lovely day wherever you are in the world. Thanks for watching, and until my next video, happy gardening everyone. Bye.